There's rumors that Utah could be looking to leave the Big 12 already and head to the ACC. I mean, I ain't buying it, but hey, let's talk about it and see if there's validity to it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes today. And today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning guaranteed. And that's $150 with any winning $5 bet. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. I'm excited to be joined by Alex Napoles on today's show. Alex is going to jump on in one moment, but did want to say, I want to show off the new background here for a second. I wanted to shout out my mom, Kelly, my dad, Tom, and my brother, Jack, who helped me build and assemble this. So finally looking a little more like a Utah man with all of this up, as Alex is going to hop in here with me now too. Glad to get a little more than just the wall back there. And Alex, I got the new background. You know, it's a short week. I should be really, and I'm in a good mood in general always. But I got to be honest and say I'm not fired up for this topic, but I know it's one we have to discuss because of the rumors. And I'll be honest with you guys. I host this show because I love Utah football. This is not Locked On Conference Realignment. I do not get excited to talk about the possibilities of Utah potentially moving to another conference. But unfortunately, that's what we have to do because Dick Wise, who I will be honest, when I first heard this report, this is no disrespect to Dick. I just did not know. There's a lot of reporters out there. This guy's a Hall of Famer. He has done incredible things in his career. I just had not heard of him. When I heard it was Dick Wise, I was like, okay, is this a real report? Then I looked up and saw, oh, Dick is extremely accomplished. He's very well connected. And this is the report that he has. Speculation is circling about potential shifts in college sports conferences. There's discussion, and Dick posted this on his X account. There's discussion about Utah possibly moving to the ACC despite its recent move to the Big 12, with some suggesting the ACC might be a better fit due to its ESPN network agreement and potential for increased TV value. However, skepticism exists regarding the stability and attractiveness of the ACC compared to the Big 12. That is the most key sentence in what Dick is saying, in my opinion. The skepticism regarding the stability and attractiveness of the Big 12. I will also say about Dick Wise, he is in his X bio, it says Hoops Wise. He's more a basketball guy than anything else. This tweet is put in there, and then it's a bunch of tweets covering the NBA and all these other things like that. And I'm not saying I'm sure he has a good source. I'm sure this was told to him like that. But there are also a lot of people, including myself, who thought we had sources about Utah staying in the Pac-12. That didn't happen. And the people with the Big 12 stuff, that ended up coming to fruition. So this is all just a crapshoot. You never know what is to actually believe. Alex, we can talk about why in a moment, the specifics of why I don't believe this more than anything, probably the instability of the ACC and the fact that Utah just jumped into the Big 12, which I feel like has a better outlook currently than the ACC. I don't see this happening. How do you react to all these reports?
I'm on the same boat as you. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying what they're selling. There's a lot of keywords in that tweet that you just read. Words like speculation, words like possibility. That whole last sentence is just like, well, you know. Yes. And it's I'm not buying it. You know, we just got done with all this realignment stuff. We just went through all this. It doesn't make sense for Utah to be back in these conversations so quickly if there's any validity to it.
Reports like these two, and Dick is just reporting what he's hearing. But like you said, it is hilarious that in this he says like, hey, I'm just hearing this is out there. So then if it comes to fruition, then he's correct. Which, like I said, he's just reporting he's hearing it. That's fine. But then he also, like we said, threw in at the end. However, skepticism exists regarding the stability and attractiveness of the ACC compared to the Big 12. All the things. So very at the end, giving himself an out if it doesn't come to fruition, which I've never been a big fan of that. And once again, not trying to go at Dick in this situation, but the truth of the matter is, when you think of the reporters on the college football front about realignment, you think of Ross Dellinger, you think of Pete Thamel. You do not think of Dick Wise. And that is just a simple fact of the matter. Once again, this is a guy who primarily has hoops in the name. A lot of his focus right now is on hoops. And I know college football is not in season, but I'm just saying, if you don't have a proven track record of breaking these stories, and if someone wants, they can send me all the stories that he has broken about college football. I'm not saying he hasn't done other things in his field. This is a Hall of Famer we're talking about, but there's just not much of a precedent for me to look. And there were so many random reports and sources and all these things the last time we did all this. That's why I'm just having a hard time believing this. And let's just for a second say that this is true, that Utah is looking at their Big 12 situation that they're in, which I think is a good situation after what happened with the Pac-12. And they're like, you know what? We want to go to the ACC. Literally, the ACC right now is having some of its most valued brands sue them to try and escape. Florida State is trying to do it, and so is Clemson. They are trying to get out because they want to get to the SEC or the Big Ten. Why in the world should Utah want to leave a conference which, at the moment, everyone wants to stay in? So the best brands, yes, Texas and Oklahoma are gone. That is obviously a huge blow to their brand. And then the Big 12 has been recovering from there. Why in the world would you go to the ACC when literally the conference could start to crumble a little bit? And this might be even more because it could start with Florida State and Clemson. And what happens? Those schools break through. North Carolina looks at it and goes like, oh, we can get out. Miami looks and then, oh, we can get out. Like, I don't see the value in going to a conference which we know conference realignment could be on the horizon from them when, yes, and I know conference realignment, anything can happen. You can't say that about the current state of the Big 12.
Yeah, and I mean, let's take a look at the situation where Utah just got out of that situation with the Pac-12.
Yes.
They just escaped a situation where there was instability, where there was questions about the future of the conference, and they put themselves in a conference where not only they can be successful, but in a conference that gives them stability. It doesn't make sense for them to jump ship so quickly into a conference that's facing these issues where you have schools like Clemson, like Florida State, who are big hitters in those conference wanting to leave. So Utah would just be leaving to go back to a similar situation that they saw themselves in a couple of months ago with the Pac-12.
And I'll also say this about them. First of all, absolutely agree with everything you just said. For Utah, well, I just don't see why you leave the Pac-12 to then go into the Big 12 just to leave before you even get settled in. It doesn't make any sense. All of those things are true. Looking back on this whole situation, it's just been a wild one. I just don't understand the value in leaving the Big 12 for the ACC. And this is just conference realignment is always going to churn on. There's always going to be craziness and news. I feel like Utah's set up for success in the Big 12. I like the direction things are heading in the Big 12 versus the ACC. There's a lot of uncertainty. And this is the other thing I wanted to say, because there's been in the report, it talked about the TV deal for the ACC versus the Big 12. I think the ACC, I saw they get like 17% of the college football playoff versus the Big 12 gets like 15%. So like it seems pretty minute. And I also think, and this is where all this stuff gets confusing, like rights and mumbo jumbo and all of that. Like if Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, like all these schools potentially leave the ACC, I just have a hard time believing those TV deals are going to be as attractive with the ACC, because if the schools can sue the conference and get out, then maybe the TV company can be like, oh, well, we signed on to have these groups on, so now our TV deal isn't as valuable. So there's all these unknowns and variables. Also, based on what I read, the Big 12 has Fox and ESPN versus the ACC currently just has ESPN. So that also has to matter, and it's an important topic of discussion here. So if you guys want more on this whole thing, Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football, he dove into it yesterday. Ton of information out there online. If there's a strong reason to talk about it on tomorrow's show, I will. I hope to not have to, and look to talk about other things relating to Utah football, especially the on-the-field product. And one of the biggest things that enhances the Utah football on-the-field product is Andy Ludwig as this team's offensive coordinator. Want to talk about Andy Ludwig being inside the top 5 highest paid offensive coordinators in one moment. But first, want to talk to you all about our great friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's capital LNO, one word, locked on, and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And speaking of FanDuel, there is tons of great playoff action going on, whether it's the NHL and NBA or MLB regular season. Lots of odds and lines to look at. We're getting closer to getting the NBA Finals set. Unfortunately, my Minnesota Timberwolves have not been able to make it a competitive series against the Dallas Mavericks. So do you guys think those games are ending in 4? Do we see a longer playoff series continue there? How about going over to the Stars and the NHL side of things from Texas standpoint? Now we're getting into NHL a little bit more out here in Utah. Might be worth checking out all of the latest lines and odds at FanDuel. You can visit FanDuel.com to look at all of the odds today. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Alex, Andy Ludwig is inside the top 5 highest paid offensive coordinators. PFF College Football recently put out the list with Mike Denbrock as the top earner. Chip Kelly is second. Denbrock at $2.1 million. Kelly at $2 million, having just left UCLA. And Andy Ludwig is $1.8 million, right along with Garrett Riley at $1.7. Charles Wise Jr. is $1.6. Andy, I'm not going to attempt his last name. I'm just going to butcher it. The Penn State OC, $1.6 million. So Andy Ludwig kind of sandwiched in with all of those guys as well. I think there are a lot of Utah fans who will look at this and go, that is ridiculous. He should be not be in there. Is Andy Ludwig one of the top 5 offensive coordinators in top college football? I think that's debatable. And for some of you to go, that's absolutely ridiculous. Well, I'm saying offensive coordinators. Lincoln Riley's not in this discussion. Ryan Day, well, I guess now it could be not, is definitely not in the discussion because Chip Kelly's an offensive coordinator now again. Like, there are some of the best offensive minds in college. Steve Sarkisian, they call their own plays. So those guys aren't in this discussion. And yes, I know Utah is coming off a season in which they average 23 points per game. And you're like, well, that's not good enough to be considered in the top. You would want to be averaging something like Notre Dame average, right? Notre Dame is the Fighting Irish last year. They averaged 38 points per game. But you know what? Notre Dame had a healthy quarterback in offense. When Andy Ludwig had those things, he averaged 38 points per game back in 2022. So the highest paid offensive coordinator is coming off a season in which his team averaged 38 points per game. And the starting quarterback, only the most important position for a team and an offense, when Andy Ludwig had that at his disposal, not even mentioning Brant Keithy and some of those things being out, he averaged the same amount. And there's also very minute differences between some of the other guys in there. And I like Garrett Riley. I think he crushed it at TCU. Things obviously didn't go great this last year at Clemson. I have no problem with Andy Ludwig being right in here. And I think he's maximized the Utah offense a lot. This team doesn't win back-to-back Pac-12 championships in large part without his contributions. Maybe someone could be better, but guess what? That's the unknown. And I think overall, even though I have myself complained about some of the things Andy Ludwig has done, cough, cough, the third down runs drive me insane, but I think he's done a good job overall. And I think he belongs in the top 5 offensive coordinators payment-wise based on who else is on this list.
Overall effective, overall deserved, I believe, for Andy Ludwig being a top 5. You go back to the Troy Taylor's days, and I remember the discourse of the Troy Taylor being the offensive coordinator and all that situation. But look, I think Utah got really lucky getting Andy Ludwig back here to the University of Utah, and I think he's done well with the tools that he's been given. As you mentioned, last year, averaging 38 points with a healthy quarterback and a good offense. This season, I think even with the injuries and even with the situation, I still think Andy did a lot of good things considering the situation that Utah was in. I think no matter which way you spin it, no matter which way you look at it, Ludwig deserves to be a top 5. His work speaks for it at this point, in not only in his career but in his time as Utah.
Yeah, and once again, this is a guy who this is a true statement. Kyle Whittingham is an unreal head coach. He's one of the best in college football. I absolutely think he's one of the 5 best. He is not among the top 5 easiest coaches to be an offensive coordinator under. This is a guy who makes you run the ball, who wants to take care of the ball, who I think sometimes when I get frustrated with Andy Ludwig on a run and 3rd and long, I got to believe that's Kyle Whittingham being like, I don't trust my quarterback at the time. You run the ball here. And I do think that is a factor. That is not inside information. I'm not saying I know he does that, but I'm just saying we've seen Andy Ludwig do a great job with some creativity and things of that nature. And I know fans get frustrated and things like that, but I'll also say, I mean, hindsight is always 20/20, right? Like if a play doesn't work after, of course we're going to be like, oh, this doesn't work. It's a lot harder to actually be an offensive coordinator. And when this team has had healthy quarterbacks, they've produced and done a really good job. And last year's Pac-12 was really good. Utah was never going to contend if Cam wasn't healthy. Bo Nix if Bo Nix got hurt, that was an Oregon team that wasn't going to contend. There's a reason that Utah was able to contend in 22. They survived 1 game with Bryson Barnes, but that's not going and winning a gauntlet of a schedule. They beat one at Washington State in an ugly game too. So that's where I think there's a lot of negative discourse around Andy Ludwig. I think he has done a good job as Utah's offensive coordinator. When healthy, they've produced. And once again, they had averaged what the highest paid offensive coordinator averaged this last year. I don't think Notre Dame's offense lights anyone up. And I'll also say this yet again, I'm not saying Andy Ludwig is a top 5 offensive mind in college football because all of those guys are head coaches. So that's where I also think this discussion deserves to be brought up. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I do think he's one of the 5 best strictly offensive coordinators. And you know what else is huge? The continuity. Utah's lucky to have continuity and not be replacing and recycling offensive coordinators and figuring things out of that nature. When Cam Rising's been healthy, we don't look at this Utah offense and go, coming up short. Nope, that was not what happened the 2 years they won. Since Cam has taken over, this offense has hummed along pretty well. And not every game is perfect. But that's also the reality for every single team. Even Georgia last year, they didn't make the college football playoff, right? Because their offense had some struggles against Alabama. So I think sometimes the negative discourse there gets way too loud. I think Andy Ludwig deserves this spot on the top 5. I think he's done a good job. I like the way he marries the run and the pass. I think they are going to be even more. I think we could get closer to 50-50 or maybe even slightly above 50 with a pass to run, because I just feel like with Cam and some of the weapons this team has, unlike before, I'm excited to see what Andy Ludwig can do with a Dorian Singer, fully healthy Brant Keithy, and some of these other pieces at his disposal in the Big 12.
Absolutely. And it's something that we haven't seen Andy have in the past. I think there's been, in the past, there's been questions about Utah's wide receiver room, but I think this year, not only does he have the quarterback, not only does he have the tight end, he has the wide receivers to be very competitive. And I'm very excited to see what Andy's mind creates with that offense.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to check everything out and see how it all ends up going this fall. It's something we're excited to continue to watch and monitor and break down on Locked On Utes. But before we get out of here on today's episode, want to take a second to talk and remember one of the greatest basketball players of his time and one of the best analysts and color commentators ever in Bill Walton, who tragically passed away when we are recording this on Tuesday. I want to start with a quick story. For those of you who follow me on X, you might have heard it briefly. But Bill Walton is someone who, when I was at Utah, you'd watched and heard him so much growing up, right, Alex? The funny catchphrases and random, and even more so than catchphrase, I guess. It's just all the kind of random things he would talk about. His love for the Pac-12 was infectious. The way he just loved calling games, doing things like eating a cupcake. It was unconventional. It was funny. For someone like me, who, I'll be honest, did not like, when I was 5 years old, I did not love sports. I like sports, but I didn't love it until I got even older. Those were things like that. Like when my dad was watching sports, I could still turn on Bill and obviously laugh my head off at all the other random funny stuff and wild stuff. And it was always an entertaining piece and aspect. So obviously Bill's a legend. Bill, of course, worked the Pac-12 network forever. When I was an intern at the University of Utah, I did the talent stats. What the talent stats do is when you guys watch a Pac-12 game or just any broadcast in general, big time, and there's a particular note and stat, like this is the largest run we've seen in the NBA this season. That is not the play-by-play guy having a note on that. That is the talent stats person who writes that down on a little Post-it note and then passes it over to them. That's something I got to do a lot during my time at Utah. So I had always dreamed of doing that and having the chance to work with Bill Walton. Unfortunately, the year I was the main talent stats guy for the University of Utah wasn't very good. So I did not get the chance to work with Bill Walton, unfortunately, which was a real bummer because I was like, it would have been great to work with him. But fast forward a few years later, I'm at the Final Four. And Bill Walton and we're at this, it's a big concert event. Tim McGraw's performing. And, we're just sitting there enjoying the concert. And Bill Walton walks in the front row. So the entire time at the concert, I can see Bill Walton with his hands in the air, waving them around, having a great time. And my dad had actually known him. I forgot how, but they knew each other. So we were like, my dad was like, I'm going to try to get Bill to stop on his way out. And this was just literally a year and a half ago. So Bill was very tired after standing and enjoying the concert. And my dad asked me if we would take a photo real quick. And not only did he take a photo with me and my brother, but then he stood an extra minute or two and still talked and took the time. Bill was exhausted. He had been standing out in the sun for a while. And then when the sun set, just like it had been a long day, we were all tired. So for him to be willing to take a second stop and then take a photo with me, with my brother, talk with us was just something I always really appreciated. And you always could tell, like, he just seemed like such a great guy off the air. You see the countless tributes being posted online. It feels like that's been confirmed. I felt lucky that I got to meet him in that brief second, and we'll always look back fondly on that photo. And just such a great, just a giant of a man, obviously, but his heart might have been even bigger, Alex. And the sports media world is in a worse place it is today because Bill Walton is no longer with us.
I love that you shared that story, man. That story was beautiful, and I think it just goes to show, just kind of give you an inside look of what kind of man Bill was. Obviously, everyone's going to remember him as the basketball legend. Obviously, everyone's going to remember him as the commentator legend and the love he brought to the game of basketball. But you don't necessarily ever hear the beautiful stories like that of the person behind the mic, right? And so I'm glad you had the opportunity to not only experience that, but to share that here and let everybody know what kind of man Bill was. Deeply saddened to hear about his passing.
Yeah, our thoughts and prayers with his family, and just someone that is gone but will obviously never be forgotten. Alex, you want to talk about Bill, one of the bigger what ifs if he stayed healthy. I mean, he won a title really early in his career. Like, he would have been, if he could have stayed healthy, you talk about peaks. His is up there with a lot of the other guys. So, but someone who obviously accomplished so much, and just a great example too of what it's like living life to the fullest. His joy was infectious for how much he loved the conference and everything too. And I'm glad that he got to see the final Pac-12 game too. There's just something poetic and fitting about that for its biggest champion in the media getting to go out and see that as well. So once again, our thoughts and prayers with Bill's family, with everything. And we appreciate all of you guys for tuning into our show, and we will be back with you more tomorrow. Alex, thank you as always. If you guys want more of Alex's stuff, make sure you give him a follow at Napoles Alex. He's just wrapping up the high school playoffs with KSL Sports Rewind, but he's got a lot of other fun and exciting stuff coming up, don't you, Alex?
Absolutely. Always on the move. Getting ready to transition into some baseball season and getting ready to start football season at KSL Sports as well. We're already starting our prep for that. So it's awesome to kind of see it all unfold and ready for another year, man.
It should be another great football season. We'll obviously be talking a lot more football on Locked On Utes this week. So we hope you'll all join us then. Have a great day.